All right, welcome back, everybody. I'll be filling in on this hearing as well. It's the Ways and Means Committee hearing. We are going to have a presentation on minority, women-owned, and small business development. And with us, we have Director Paul Taylor to provide us an update. You got to unmute him.
Good morning, everyone. This is Paul Taylor with in the Mayor's Office of Small and Minority Business, and we essentially are an organization that provides advocacy and navigation for small business in Baltimore City. We provide help with companies looking to start and operate and grow their small businesses. We also help many of our city contractors who are looking for opportunities to do business with the city of Baltimore. And there are a couple of services that we also provide. One is that we provide services such as the Main Streets, which is in 8 areas throughout the city. We also have a program called the Small Business Resource Center, which has in it a one-stop portal online called Baltimore Source Link. We also operate a grant, a federal grant, which provides assistance to advanced manufacturing. And this is to try to bring small manufacturers to Baltimore and to help them grow here in Baltimore. So those are the main businesses. This is all supported by the $1.6 million, $1.624 million budget. And that budget supports 7 full-time employees, 1 part-time employees. That position is currently vacant. The major things that budget supports: payroll, of course, but we also operate an office. At the beginning of the pandemic, we moved our offices out of City Hall, and we're now all at the office at 3000 Druid Park Drive. So we pay rent there. So a lot of the costs are also associated with the rent that we pay in that building. The highlights of our program has been that during the pandemic, we've provided assistance, additional assistance to our Main Street managers, and those programs have been really helping the constituents, the small businesses in that area, to survive and to thrive in some instances. We're very happy and pleased that we worked with Baltimore Development Corporation to provide assistance. So many of the counseling hours that were done, some of the navigation that was done to help small business was done with our offices who worked with them to provide that counseling and guidance to some of those small businesses. We continue to work with SBA and many of the programs and grant programs that have been able to help small businesses continue to open their doors and keep their business intact and keep their employees intact also. I will stop there and open for questions.
Thank you. Let's see here. Let's start with Council President Mosby. Not sure if he's here. All right, we'll come back. I do see Councilmember Ramos with your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm okay. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Did you have a question, Councilmember Ramos?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Hi, Mr. Taylor. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for all you're doing. And I was glad to, one of my questions was that had you worked with BDC on all of the work that was done, and I'm grateful that that you were involved with that, because it's kind of what you've been doing all along. So I wanted to make sure that that was that partnership is important. My question was about do you have anybody on staff who is a Spanish speaker who's been working with our Latino businesses in the city?
No, not at this time, but we work very closely with Director Catalina Rodriguez, who has that service. She has a couple of staff that have worked with us and partnered with us on some instances when we needed that.
Okay, and then you moved. This was years ago when you had you were at Eastern, right? And
Yes.
so now you're over in Drew Park Drive. So are some of the services that you're providing also going to be, well, not during the pandemic, obviously, but as this eases up, will you be working hand in hand with businesses on site to help them? I mean, one of the things you and I talked about again years ago when I was chair of the Baltimore Hispanic Chamber, that many of our businesses are cash businesses. The cash is in the drawer, which
Right.
means it's totally unsafe.
Yeah.
And you can't grow a business that way unless you're
Right.
banked and have financing. So,
Right.
and I know that's one thing that you've been working on with them. So, I guess that's an example of sort of working hand in hand, one-on-one, going to the business and, working with them directly. So after the pandemic, obviously,
Yeah.
will you be doing that because there's going to be a lot more business activity, which I'm really excited about. So,
Yeah.
will you be working one-on-one with them that way, going to them, or will they have to come to you?
We'll continue to go to them. What we've been doing since the pandemic is we formed a little hot team. That team is with a bank, business development person in the community, and we've been actually working in the community still while the pandemic's been going on. So we still have some of our seminars that we've always had, but we have them now virtually. So we're doing a lot of work online. So we'll continue to do that, and we will definitely go to the communities where we've met. What we've done is identified a couple of resource people that we think are important to the business community. A couple of our lending institutions in town have actually made a point of doing their outreach. M&T Bank, BB&T Bank, well now Truist, have made a concerted effort to work with us to go into the community, even if they're not lending there in particular, but they want to provide resources to those communities. So we've been continuing to do those sessions, and we make them visible on the the portal that I call Baltimore SourceLink.com, which has made a lot of those resources still available. So we get a lot of calls. Just so you know, on Baltimore SourceLink, we get about 200 visitors a day looking at those sites. So we have to keep a lot of that information updated, and we've used it as a single point of entry so that we can make sure that if somebody needs assistance, there's an on-ramp for them to get assistance.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is you're going to get 2 additional staff, it looks like, or at least the EMBU office is. And is that particular for the procurement efforts in terms of certifying MBEs and enhancing the programs there?
Yeah, so just so you know, I'm just making clear that the EMBU's a different office, is in the law department. The 2 staff that they're getting is going to really be on the compliance side, because we've been working with them, because one of the challenges that they have, they just didn't have enough staff to get through the backlog of small business. So I think the 2 staff that they're getting, and they'll probably discuss this more with you when they come on, but the 2 staff that they're getting is actually to do more compliance, because that's been a big backlog and a problem for them.
Okay, I'll ask that more specifically then. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, well, I saw the hand go up and then go down. Council Vice President, did you have a question?
I guess part of it was answered, but I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi. Good.
I know your office in the new location is sort of a bigger office, and I know I guess you have been starting to have training there,
Yes.
so businesses can be certified and so on. Do you have numbers of how many I guess outcomes of successful businesses that have been through your training and have gone on to become certified? Is there some data that has started?
So one of the measures of our success is not only certification, because again, that is something that's controlled by the law department, but what we actually look at is when businesses come to us, one, did they start a business, right? The other is if they were already in business, were they able to get loans or grants? Now, this year it happened to be grants is another measure that we've been using. And then were they able to add additional employees? And so those are kind of the quick and easy measures that we have. And what we've looked at is when I looked at the database for this year, we capture everything in a database and capture the success of those businesses in that database, which is part of the SourceLink website. When we look at what's happened with that, we saw that about 40% of the small businesses that came to us that or pre-venture businesses actually went and registered with the state of Maryland and got and started a business. And so we help guide them through that process. We also see that another 25% of them were this year in particular, and this year is a little bit of a hybrid only because of the EDIL and the PPP loans. We saw that about 25% of them actually got a loan. With so and that number is low, and I think it's low. And what we found was that many of the small business that came to us, and these are between BDC and us, many of the small business that came to us. One of the challenges is that they didn't all have all their paperwork right. So we've been doing a lot of guidance to help people get their paperwork. That is, get their some of them were operating and were not in good standing with the state or other challenges that they may have had. So we've been spending a lot of time working with them.
Thank you. That's good information. And my second question, where you are located, there's a lot of work, I guess, that's starting to happen right down the street with Pimlico and with development along Park Heights Avenue and so on. Are you connected in being a part of those meetings with the Renaissance and so on?
Yes, I'm glad that you brought it up. So Ms. Jiggets and I have been meeting along with Sean Stinnett, who is a deputy in my office, have been meeting to really talk about how can we help the minority contractors that are in that area to begin to plan and address the needs that are going to be needed in there. So some of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we sort of evaluate who those contractors are. Are they ready to perform? And if they're not, what can we do to help them to get ready so that they can take advantage of some of those opportunities that are going to come in Park Heights?
Thank you. Thank you. Important for Northwest Baltimore.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair Burnett.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Next, I see Councilmember Porter. And then I'll go Councilmember Conway.
Thank you so much, Chair Burnett. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor, for providing us this presentation. I did have one question about technical assistance for small businesses post COVID-19, and I'm particularly kind of gearing more towards small businesses, particularly in South Baltimore, within that Curtis Bay and Brooklyn area, that Cherry Hill area, where they have like a thriving business district, but they don't necessarily have the technical assistance, kind of, i.e., the connection into mainstream Baltimore. Can you speak to like some of the strategies in which you're engaging with those businesses, particularly down in like that Cherry Hill, Brooklyn, and Curtis Bay communities?
Sure. I mentioned the hot team, and one of the things that Truist has done is to work with us to sort of bring some guidance to what kinds of things are needed. I think the biggest thing that I like to do when I go into an area like that is to make sure I understand who's there and what are their needs. And so it's a little bit of a triage to try to figure out what kinds of resources they need. And then we bring not only banking, but also help them to understand what does procurement look like on the city side, what does procurement look like on the state side, if they're ready for it, what procurement might look like on the federal side. So we try to bring those kind of resources. We try to also look for where there may be funding opportunities. We work very closely, for instance, with Baltimore Community Lending, who can lend to early startup businesses. So we look at ways that we can provide funding resources. So that's access to capital, technical assistance in terms of making sure that they are business ready and ready to be able to take on some of the contracting opportunities in the city. So we haven't had a close look at that area. I know that in the area recently, we had one conversation with one of the areas in around Brooklyn who wanted to know what would it look like if they became a main street, and so
Yes.
we're engaged in a conversation with them right now.
Good.
Yeah,
No,
yes.
I'm actually really happy to hear that. Meredith from Greater Baybrook Alliance, I encouraged her to reach out to you all
Yep.
to see if we can get a main street down, another main street down in South Baltimore.
Yep.
My second question actually has to do with really getting businesses like quote unquote business ready to procure with the city. Most of the businesses that I'm mentioning in South Baltimore are your mom and pop shops. They don't, they're like 1 to 2 people
Yeah.
working in those businesses. What types of technical assistance and resources do you have for those types of businesses? Because when I think about like the programs that we have in the city, the quote unquote procurement resources, they're more geared towards kind of those traditional businesses.
Yeah.
Can you speak to some of the strategies whereby we're helping some of those non-traditional businesses being able to kind of like scale up into kind of those traditional businesses?
Yeah.
And the one that comes to mind is the Baltimore Compost Collaborative with Marvin Hayes down in South Baltimore. He is a small business, mom and pop that is working in the community that is looking to kind of scale up into some of those traditional kind of funding resources that the city would offer, the city, state, and or federal would offer.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we've seen that happens on a consistent basis is that a lot of those small businesses who are mission driven, or they start a business because they have a passion about something, and tend not to be as well versed on the business side. So what we try to bring to those businesses is, if in advance of you going to see a bank, let's take a look at your operation. Let's take a look at whether you're ready to go, not just have a checking account, but what would it look like if you were able to get a line of credit, for instance. And a lot of times when we mention lines of credit, we're introducing people to those kind of concepts beyond a credit card. So what we try to do is bring the kind of resources that they are going to need. So it really takes that triage, as I mentioned earlier, where you go in, you sort of take a look at the business, take a look at their operation, and then see what would, without actually bringing them through some major course or something, be able to take them through the needs that they might have to immediately become bankable. One is to also look at where there may be opportunities to scale, where there may be opportunities to take a look at if are there any jobs or work that the city's doing that may be able to marry up with those small businesses so that they can get a more consistent source of revenue coming into their operation. So those are kinds of things that I look at when I look at small businesses like that, especially the mom and pop, that a lot of times, again, it's mission driven and they're making a reasonably good income for themselves. But how do they begin to hire people? What would that look like? What kinds of revenue would they need to come in to hire additional folk that they can begin to grow and scale their business? So we
Mr.
try
Chair,
to
may
help them.
may I ask one more question?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, no, I definitely appreciate all of your strategies. But what I'm really kind of gearing towards for South Baltimore, we have a lot of organizations that work with like not nonprofits, but coordinating bodies like the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership, Southwest Partnership. I would love to see more of those businesses that I know that are relying on those types of grant funds to be triaged into some of these programs, because I want them to become more of like a social enterprise, as opposed to just strictly relying on grant funds. Have you
Yeah,
all thought about partnering with those types of entities to kind of
sure.
transition
Yeah.
mission-driven organizations that apply for small base grant funding from the Local Development Corporation, South Baltimore Gateway Partnership into true business entities?
We're actually just starting to talk to Tony
Oh,
Scott
good.
over there. So
Okay.
we're just starting to talk about things that he needs. As he's just getting acclimated to the area, he's really starting to understand what the needs are. And so we're addressing some of those needs right now. I've also talked to the University of Maryland about what kinds of things they could do, what kinds of needs they have that could be satisfied with some of the businesses that are in the area. So we've been looking at some of the things that are going on there. I think
Sure.
it's one of our growth areas, I think, for the city.
Okay. Yeah, anything that my office can do, please definitely feel free to
We'll
reach
s-
out.
We
I want to
will.
see more businesses in South Baltimore obtain much of this funding that we're seeing from the city and
We
state.
we would love to do that. We'll do that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good to see you, Mrs. Taylor. It's been a bit. I have one hopefully simple question at the moment, and that has to do with right now. I'm looking at the budget, and unfortunately, you're looped in with just Mayor Allen,
Yeah.
which doesn't give us much insight onto how things are going. So I guess the first question is, how are things going for minority, women-owned, and small businesses? And what data do we use to back that up?
A couple of things. One is that things are getting better. Right now, it's a sort of a hybrid because we've been we've gotten so much federal funds that have been offsetting sort of our operation to sort of keep a lot of the small businesses afloat. And we've worked with BDC to make sure that those funds don't just always go to our usual suspects, but go to some of the smaller businesses in the community. And BDC did something, and they may have mentioned this in their presentation, but they did something that I thought was uniquely different. Is that instead of just making the funds available and said first come, first serve, they actually did it much more strategically, and we worked with them with that effort to make sure that the funds went to the communities that typically get lost and don't even hear about anything. And so we've had to do a lot of outreach to make sure that we connected with some of those businesses in the area. So we worked with BDC on that. We're looking at opportunities to do our outreach again. Again, we've been doing a lot of the work online. So we've done seminars. A lot of, as I said earlier, about 250 or 200 and so people are actually coming on our portal every day, and we're able to answer direct questions or make sure that they get the resources that they need. So those are the efforts that we're using. We look to open up again sometime around September so that we can start giving some of our seminars again. We're doing it online, but I think sometimes having that direct contact with people is important also.
Sure, and I'll be a little bit more pointed here, just for sort of my own edification and understanding how we measure the impact of the work that we do in your office, whether it's the training or organizing. How do we know that it's making a difference? Like how do we know? You said it's getting better. How do we know it's getting better?
So a couple of things. One is we're doing the outreach, so we're seeing how many people are getting connected. We're also making sure that if somebody says, I'm interested in starting a business to do this, or do a hair salon or whatever they're trying to do, we make sure we put the resources out there so that they can understand what it's going to take to operate that business. So what I mentioned earlier, about 60% of those people who've come to us and said, I'm interested in starting a business, they actually go from a pre-venture and they actually eventually start an operation. That means that they go and register with the Department of Assessment and Taxation, and that's one of our measures. Do they actually register with the Department of Assessment and Taxation? Beyond that, are they able to get some of the early stage loans? So we work with one of the few, but it's been pretty useful, is Baltimore Community Lending. I sit on their board, but we also make sure that we can send those early stage companies to get that loan. These are companies that are not necessarily bankable because they don't have a lot of track record. And so, so one of our other measures is, are those small businesses able to get a small business loan? Another much higher level, but is whether they're able to employ anybody. Can they, beyond the owner? And if you've looked at Baltimore statistics, you'll see that many of our small businesses are solopreneurs, right? These are single sole proprietors who are operating a business. So are they able to hire anyone else, either part-time or full-time? So those are the measures that we look at. So one is whether they actually start a business, whether they're able to get some of the early stage loans and become bankable, and two and three, whether they're able to hire anyone, being part-time or full-time. Those are the measures that we have used, and we've seen that somewhere around 40 to 60% of our folk are moving down that track, and those are and our database can track that activity, so we capture it.
That'd be super helpful. I'd like to make a request. Would you be able to share that information, that
Sure.
data? I'd love to
Sure.
see that data,
Sure.
maybe over the last 5 years to understand where we were trending
Sure.
and how the pandemic has impacted us and
Yep.
hopefully how we're recovering as a result.
Yep.
I know there are a lot of small businesses,
Yeah.
certainly in my district, and I'm 100% sure across the city,
Yeah.
that would love to benefit from some of the work you guys are doing.
Sure. Yeah, we have in our database we have about 6,200 small businesses in there that we've been either came through us as counseling or some other assistance that we've provided to them, so we can provide that information.
That would be great.
Councilmember, can you repeat the request just so I make sure the mayor's office gets it, the formal
Sure.
request?
The request is the data that has to do with over the last 5 years of businesses sort of matriculating through the tracking system that Mr. Taylor's office runs. So 5 years of that data.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The other question that I have is about infrastructure for businesses. So I know one of the just as an example, one of the things I'm trying to attempt in my district is to stand up a community benefits district or a business improvement district. Does your office in any way support with helping to build up that infrastructure, and how do you guys support?
So right now, the main resource that we support in that aspect is the main streets, Baltimore main streets. I have been talking with the planning director, Chris, to look at all of the different benefit districts, RBDLs, main streets, the arts districts, and we've been looking at what kinds of tools do we need in Baltimore City to enhance those. So that's an active conversation that we have. So I can't definitively say what we're doing right now other than operating the main streets. We've used the main streets as a template because they have a 20-year track record of doing activity around the country, and we have conversations with some of the other main streets and looking at what resources have other areas of the country used to enhance these districts. And we're asking the real question: do benefit districts, RBDLs, arts districts, do they really work? Do they make sense? Can they provide the resources, and can they garner the resources? The evidence so far says yes, and so we're looking how can we enhance them and make it work for Baltimore City.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the insight and the response, and I look forward to circling back with you as we continue on our journey to stand up the business improvement district.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And actually, between the last two, you asked the questions that I had, so I'm going to circle back around. Anybody else, colleagues, with questions for Director Taylor? All right. Okay. Seeing none, we have one formal request in that we'll get to the council. But with that, we are going to recess and return at at 12:30 with the planning department presentation. So thank you, Director Taylor, and we'll be back soon, colleagues.
All right, thank you all for the support. Thanks.